Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Today, I have the opportunity to play for you a conversation I recorded with Cait from Two Ladies and Two Babies on Instagram and TikTok. If you follow their accounts, you know that Cait calls her wife Wanda on social media. And we unpack how they made the decisions that they made about creating their family and the things that came up throughout the process. Cait also works as a social services worker in the realm of adoption. So we dove a little bit into what all of that kind of work means. And it should be pointed out that this conversation was recorded on November 6th, the morning after the night before. And we really had a good long look at what that may mean for families in the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. Welcome, everyone. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce you to Cait. Welcome, Cait. Please tell us about the members of your family.
Hey there. So I'm Cait. I am 34 and I live in Virginia in the US. And I am married to a person we will call Wanda. She is my wife, and that is her nickname that we use to be silly. We have a 4-year-old son named Remy, and we have a 2-year-old son named Van. And they are absolutely insane. And had we known, had Van been first, he would have been an only child. But lucky for him, he was second.
I totally understand that is, they come the way that they come so that you can learn how to parent the way you need to be taught those lessons, I think.
Absolutely. He's teaching lessons every moment.
Right. Not how to drink and mix a perfect margarita,
no, unfortunately, but he will bring you a drink. If you set it down, he will make sure that drink gets back in your hand. So he's helpful in that way.
Excellent. That's all you can ask for.
Exactly.
So you and Wanda have been together for how long?
Oh, goodness. We've been together for 12 years and married for 6.
Excellent.
And we forget our anniversary every year. So we just had our anniversary last month and we forgot it again. And so my mom fortunately texts us every year to remind us.
I love that. We squeaked ours in at the end of Pride Month because then it was going to be an easy remember.
Yes, that's clever. That's smart. We didn't plan that well. So
how did you meet? Was it in school or?
We actually met right when I graduated college, and it was kind of one of those messy, typical lesbian situations where I was out with somebody who I didn't realize I was on a date with, and I was kind of hooking up with somebody else at the same bar. And so they picked up on that, and they said, well, okay, do you mind if I invite my friend? And I said, sure, go ahead. And then walks in Wanda, and I'm like, oh my God. So we met in a messy type of way, and I left with her phone number in my phone, holding hands, and we've been together ever since.
Truthfully, it does sort of sound kind of stereotypical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Checks
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Exactly. So how far into the dynamics of the relationship did the two of you start talking about wanting to become parents? Was that a first date thing, or was it something you had to ease yourselves into?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily a first date thing or something we had to ease into. It's just kind of something that came up naturally. Both of us have several siblings. And so it was something that, family is a big part of our lives, and creating another family, extending that would be priority to us. And we were always on the same page with it. So it was never anything that felt like an uphill battle. I know that can be discouraging for some relationships, and you have to, kind of make that decision of, is the person what you need in all of your life, or this unknown what you need in all of your life? But we were always on the same page with it. So it worked out very well for us. I think marriage was more the thing that we weren't always aligned on. My wife comes from she describes it as a very divorced family. So she just didn't really feel like marriage was the biggest priority, but it was something that I wanted because, damn it, we were going to get the opportunity to do it finally in America. Right. So I was like, I want to. And, she got on board, and it ended up being perfectly fine for us, not really changing too much, but, it was the right move overall.
Right. Yeah. And I think that sometimes what people can forget is some of us want in our hearts the marriage, and other people are assuming that that means you want the wedding. And you can sometimes have both, but one is definitely the lifelong commitment. And then if that's what you're in it for, you do typically find things don't change a whole lot.
Yeah, not at all. And I think if anything, we just kind of grew up and it was more of when we got together, I was 22. So, I mean, the world
Mm,
that I was in was a different world.
sure.
So
Hmm.
everything just feels totally different. I think I was 22. Yeah, something like that. But it's all blur at this point. But
Sure.
it's just one of those things where when you finally commit to like an adult relationship and to that degree, it just felt a little bit different. But in the
Mhm.
bigger picture, did it change the world? No, but it changed my little world. So it was good enough for me.
And that's what we focus on our day to day, right? We're the ones we
Yep.
look at in the mirror every day.
Yep.
So you decided kids were in the works. Kids are going to be part of our dynamic moving forward. How did you make the next decision about how that would happen?
So for me, I always thought my route would be adoption, but I worked in adoption and quickly found that for me to do either of those things well, I don't feel like I could have done them concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very emotionally draining and taxing type of work. And then to know the ins and outs of the system and be kind of like bobbing and dealing with that, I just didn't know that I could do it. So we talked about that. And I had one kid who I was really attached to who was older, who if my agency would have allowed me to adopt and still work there, I would have in a heartbeat. I'm still connected with him. But that just wasn't an option. They won't allow you to. So we were like, okay, well, what can we do? So we started with going to the IVF clinic and just kind of getting a sense of what our options were. My wife is 3 years older than me, so we always just were talking about, I guess you would go first. That makes more sense. So we both got checked out. Everybody was good to go, and we decided that we would try IUI. Which is the intrauterine insemination, basically the good old turkey baster method.
Yeah.
And so our doctor was incredibly charming, wonderful, kind, compassionate. When you are looking for a doctor as a queer person, it is a different experience. Like you have to be mindful of a lot of extra parts. So it was something that like we had done research on to make sure that this clinic was a good one to go with. And we just decided to go that way. And then when it was time for me to go, we didn't have very much left of our sperm donor. We had literally had, I think, one vial was all we had. And so it was kind of like a one shot or not type of deal if I did the IUI. So I had to do IVF. So that
Right.
was a lot costlier for us. For us, insurance didn't cover a single aspect for either one of us. So we refinanced our house to be able to do it.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of help from some family members and we had saved a ton. So we were able to do it, but it was one of those things where like realistically, I joke about we only have two and Van, is crazy. So that's why I don't know
Mhm.
that we could even afford to do it a third time. It's insane. It's wild. And I have some friends who have gone through IVF and had fertility issues specifically. And because it can be determined to be a medical thing, like portions of it are covered by insurance, but for us, not a single aspect, nothing. So it's very, very costly to make a family when you have to do
Mhm.
it from a different way. And we
I-
didn't want to do the in home version because we felt like we're going to be spending so much money on sperm and just anxiety over doing it and just wanted it to be like done as right as possible to know that
mhm.
it could work. So we had a lot of anxieties about the entire process, but we ended up with two kids in the end.
And that's your goal set out at the beginning, but that still means that it's quite a path to get to that point.
Definitely. And it wasn't super easy. So, we thought with IUI, my wife had no known issues, but we still struggled a little bit to get pregnant. For her, it was mostly like we had one that was a fail. And then for a while, our timing was bad on tracking. And so you would go and they're like, well, not quite ready. Come back tomorrow. Oh, missed the window. Wait till next month. And so it was a lot of the back and forth of that. And for us as a couple, it was hard because I'm on deck being like, well, I can just go. Do you want me to just go? Do you want me to da da da? Which was
Right.
me trying to be helpful, but also like I'm a very anxious person. And so I'm like, let me help. And for her, it's my body's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Why isn't this working? Oh my gosh. So I think that was something that now that I have perspective, like zooming out on that and seeing, I think I could have done a better job of being a lot more mindful of how she was going through the process independently versus just us as a collective, because I was just thinking of the end goal and not
Right.
necessarily being in the moment of the parts that were hard.
Yeah. And I think I think we can learn those lessons in the queer community, especially as a couple with two uteruses, differently than really anyone else in the world can learn, because you have both now carried a child and birthed a child and seen the pregnancy through the opposite lens
Yeah.
to your partner. And it is with that we gain some clarity and insight as to how their journey must have been or may have been for them based on how they acted, what they said, the length of time it took, all of the things.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a gift that sort of it expands the dynamics of our relationship to be able to understand that better, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you often hear people say, if they're in a cisgendered heterosexual relationship, for instance, that they didn't feel like their partner understood
Mm-hmm.
how they were feeling when they were going through their fertility challenges. And certainly maybe in the moment you couldn't
Yeah.
for Wanda at the time, but retrospectively, you really got some clarity on that, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And we very much have different communication styles in terms of like emotional things. I am a talk you to death person, and she is a I don't want to talk about it until I'm ready to way, way, way later, if at all. So
Hmm.
I really just didn't know what to do with myself. I just wanted to do too much, really, when I just kind of needed to sit in it more. So definitely, if anybody's in a situation like that, like just slow down, pause,
Hmm.
because it is a little bit easier to pay attention and be attuned.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. My wife and I are opposites in that I too am a talk it to death kind of person and have had to learn over the years that when she says I need time,
Mm-hmm.
that means I don't sit beside her and go, so is it time yet? Is it
Yeah.
time yet? Is it time?
Yeah. Oh, and it's hard. It's so hard because that's your natural instinct. And
Yeah.
for you, I don't know if you feel this way. I do. I feel unbalanced when I don't have resolution or an
Mhm.
answer. And if someone tells me we're going to talk about something later, I need to know what it is, what's the context, when
And
it's going to
when?
happen. Yes. And it needs to happen then. If you're a minute late, I'm like, oh. So, I mean,
That's fair.
I'm way too type A, and she's more like, chill, good vibes. I am the anxiety for us. She doesn't have anxiety, which is crazy to me. Like, you don't feel that? You don't hear a voice in your head yelling that everything's screwed up all the time? Like, wow, good for you. I want
Well,
that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But now I'm worried about you not worrying
Yeah,
about
yeah,
things.
that's not good. That can't be good. Yes, it is a true struggle.
It is. It is. But you mentioned something that is, I think, important. You said if you're feeling stressed out, if you're feeling anxious about things, slow down. And
Mhm.
I think that this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to fertility and when we're getting reproductive assistance. It's not that we're doing it at home, we're trying as often as we can,
Mhm.
whenever the mood strikes. We're working on a timetable that someone else and our bodies, but not our brains, have
Yep.
set out for us. So it feels like we're working against the clock, and it's hard, therefore, to slow down.
And financially, it continues to add up. The more times you have
Mhm.
to try. For us, our doctor told us only get 3 vials of sperm because maybe your body just doesn't mix well with this person. And so maybe it might do better with a different donor. So then I'm like, okay, we have in our head that this is the person who's going to be our donor. And then, I would have to completely shift my mindset, different expectation, and all of that. So you kind of start to look at and fixate on all of these little factors that you want to have control over, but you have zero control over. And that is a very strange feeling. It's an awful feeling,
Absolutely.
quite honestly.
Yeah, no, it truly is. It truly is. And you used a donor. Did you go through a big bank or
Yeah, we did a cryobank here, Fredericksburg, or no, Fairfax. Sorry, I'm lying.
Fairfax? Yeah.
We did Fairfax, and what's
Yes.
wild is we're on the donor sibling registry, and we have our first and only match so far in Canada, which I didn't even realize that they got them from Canada as well. Families, could get it from here. And it's a two lesbian mom couple, and the one of the moms, the one who's like us, the talker, she reached out to me and she's a social worker. I'm like, this is crazy, which is what I do. So
Wow.
I'm like,
Yeah.
just the world is so small. And they have two girls who are very close in age to our two boys.
Wow. There
Yeah,
you go. There you
wild.
go. That is so wild. And kind of cool. And yet I say it's kind of cool because for me it would be super cool. And yet I know so many people who are afraid of using banks and
Mhm.
getting on those registry lists because they're afraid of how they would feel if somebody reached
Yeah.
out to them.
Well, and there's enough documentaries to freak you out. Like, let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't do a big bank and you think that you're using whoever's, like, you got to have full trust in these physicians to do exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
But it's just it's kind of crazy.
It is.
Mhm.
It totally is. So, Wanda went first, you went second. Were things pretty straightforward for both of you once the conception actually happened?
Yes, both of us. So I'll start with her. So with our oldest boy, Remy, he had an abnormality on a scan. And of course, the doctor, it was like on a Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it's one of those things where they're like, this doesn't look good. Well, we'll call you on Monday. Had us freaked out the entire weekend or crying the whole way home. I mean, it was just awful. And then we had to go to specialists a few different times. And he ended up being perfectly fine. Came out 99th percentile, giant child, super perfect and super sweet and so sensitive. And then with Van, who was my child, we really were very lucky with the IVF. All of that went super well. We had multiple embryos, but he too had, some things that they were looking at on scans. And then, of course, he's my stubborn child. When we would go for the anatomy scan, he wouldn't cooperate at all. So I had to go back 2 different times. They still couldn't get stuff. Then they thought something was wrong with one of his organs. And I'm like, it's probably just him. It was, everything was fine, but it was just so scary. And I don't
Mhm.
know if, anybody else has ever felt this way. I always held my breath until I saw the heartbeat for every
Mhm.
scan, even if nothing was happening. I just
Mhm.
needed to know that it was there. And that was just a horrible and stressful experience every time. But as soon as it was there, I was like, oh, I can
Yeah.
finally relax.
Yeah. It's funny. I often say when I'm teaching a prenatal class, it's very normal to look for blood every time you go to the washroom
Yeah.
because people think that they're panicking and that they're the only ones. I'm like, nah,
Yep.
we have all done it.
Yeah. My wife had a little bit of bleeding with Remy. We went right in. They hooked her up to a Doppler and everything was fine, but it was very, very early in the beginning. And we were like,
Mhm.
oh gosh. But
Mhm.
it, we were really lucky that the doctor's office was able to see us like as quickly as they did. I mean, it was like within that hour. So it
Mhm.
almost felt like crisis resolution immediate, which, that's what I
Right.
need. So it
Exactly.
helped.
I
It
hear
helped big time, but
you.
it was
Yeah.
scary. Very, very
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. So you've alluded to the fact that having your two children was not an inexpensive journey.
Not at all.
Are you comfortable giving a ballpark idea as to how much the two of you had to spend with everything considered, purchasing the sperm, going to the reproductive endocrinologist, IUIs, IVF, all the things?
I would say easily 30 to $40,000, like
Yeah.
easily. Um, we had to pay for every single tiny expense. And then, just having a baby in general, going to the hospital to have a baby, like you still have to pay for all of that crap over here.
Hmm.
I mean, some stuff is covered by insurance finally once you have a child, but I mean, it was just insane the amount of money. And I know people in my personal life who have done fertility treatments for years and years and years and years and years. And I can't even imagine the amount that they've had to pay.
Hmm.
It's wild to me.
Yeah. And it is some insurance companies will cover some things. And to be fair, as much as things are covered in Canada, and they are, our universal healthcare system is fantastic. Fertility is fertility, and so it's still a separate private business, and it isn't inexpensive, and people still have to pay out of pocket here. And you get the odd company that has set up a good insurance program so that something's covered, maybe the medications are covered, but the services aren't or what have you. But
Yeah,
it's expensive.
it's crazy. And, for us, my company, the insurance would pay, but only if it was a medical necessity. So for us, it was determined not to be medical necessity. So there were some factors that, one of my employees had the same doctor and did IVF like a year after me. And she was like, all of my stuff was covered. I was like, yeah, different situation, girlfriend. And she was like, oh my
Mhm.
God, that's crazy. But for us, it's considered not a medical necessity. We're just out here playing, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
goofing off trying to make people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and so is that something, because I have talked to people who had a similar experience. A couple of different people I've spoken to over the last year in the US have said that they went to their HR departments and said, like, what's the deal? Why do you have our insurance set up like this so that it's only cishet people that can have insurance benefits when they're trying to create a family? And it's surprising to me the number of HR departments that have come back and said, well, we didn't even realize that we had it set up that way.
Yeah.
Let's make
So,
some changes.
so I worked for a fairly large conservative county government. So
Mhm.
it was not something that I think I would have ever been able to make any chip away at. I can tell you, even parental leave up until the last couple of years ago was abysmal. There was no leave for the other parent until recently, and that parent I think gets 2 weeks, and then they upped it this past year, so it's gotten a bit better. But even for the moms, you only get like 3 or 4 weeks off, or whoever's carrying that individual
Mhm.
only gets 3 or 4 weeks off, and then the rest of it you have to use your own time that you've earned, and then you have no sick leave or anything after that. So I mean, it's just crazy to me. But I could see, maybe a smaller organization or an organization that is really open, you could make some changes. I can tell you it would be a very, very uphill battle in the place
Mhm.
where I previously worked. I'm no longer there, but there's no way, unfortunately.
No. And that's sad and short-sighted, really,
Mm-hmm.
in the grand scheme of things. The
Yeah.
people that are making the rules are often the people who then end up with a family member who could have used the services that they've been saying no to for years, right?
Yep. Yep. And let them make one change. And then it's like, look at the thing we did for y'all. And like, you know, we're so
That's,
great. I'm like, really?
do you want me to pat you on the back?
Yeah. With my limp wrist, I'll pat you on the back.
That's,
Might not
that's
feel it very well.
no. What's the one thing that you wish people had told you before you started on this journey to family creation so that would maybe make it easier or at least less frightening or something?
Hmm. I think maybe I kind of fixated on all of the bad things that were happening at the time and like being stressed about all of the factors that I couldn't control. And that's just a theme in life for me. Like I'm the fixer type of person. I usually
Mhm.
find myself in leadership roles, and that's just kind of the stuff that I do is I make things happen. And I've not failed at many things because I'm relentless.
Right.
I just can't. So I had to come to terms with the fact that things were outside of my control, and to trust the people that knew what I needed to do, and just move through the motions. Quit trying to dictate every single aspect. What's meant to be will be, it will be okay. And that I had a lot of options. I think I can kind of get this little pipeline view of this is how this will look and this is how it will happen, instead of zooming out and saying, okay, that might not work, but I've also got this option. I've also got this option. I get kind of fixated on what I think is going to be my outcome and what I think is the only outcome that could ever exist. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, even if we did have to get a different donor, that's not the end of the world. What a privilege to be able to do that. So
Right.
just kind of zooming out on big picture, and that if one path doesn't work, there are several other that you can explore.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And sometimes knowing some of that in advance just helps you take a couple of deep breaths as you go into it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well, and that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information. In light and for full transparency, we're recording this on November 6th, and it won't air until later in the month. But it is the morning after the night before. And, one of the first things that came to my mind this morning when I woke up was, especially for my peers in the US, second parent adoptions.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that you and Wanda have done? Is this something you have in place so that, I mean, assuming that no rights are stripped from you, that you get to maintain your connection?
So what's hilarious is we already talked about it again this morning.
Mm-hmm.
My history of work professionally is adoptions. And so I've known that we needed to do the step parent adoption. I've already completed all of the petitions and paperwork myself. I just literally need to go and file. We hadn't made it priority because for us in Virginia and a lot of US states, we are both on the birth certificate. And so we were like, right now we're okay. Not the biggest deal in the world. It'll be fine. We can file if we need to. Now, given the tone of life here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I've got all the documents ready. We'll go do it all next week. So it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know. And I don't think I would have known if I didn't work in the field that I do. A lot of people assume because their names are on the birth certificates that, like, that's fine. They're totally good. Your government has a lot more say in things if you're not also legally bound to an adoption. And so people need to move forward with that if they haven't. I would recommend it definitely be something that is done. And it's not a difficult thing to do. You don't have to have an attorney to do it. You can file all the petitions and, get a notary and do it all through the court. It is a process that is not difficult, but you could even reach out to your local social services or Department of Children and Families, whatever it's called in your area, and get advice on how to do it. But I definitely am going to be moving forward with it for our boys.
Yeah. Now, I was talking to somebody in North Carolina, and they say that theirs is not a second parent adoption, but instead a step parent adoption, as though they've just come into the child's life later on. Where you are, is it step, or is it single or second rather, or?
It's really semantics. It's the exact same process. It will be on the paperwork. I believe it will show up as a second parent adoption, but it's the exact same process as a step parent adoption, because you could have a step parent who was there from birth. So, it really is, it's going to kind of depend for us and, folks like us. We won't have to go through as much of a process as a person who maybe has something that's contested, or there's a different parent involved and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That requires, an investigation that's completed by the social services, where a whole report, like a home study type of thing, is done. So that looks different, and can be a little bit harder. And I would say get an attorney for that. But
Mm-hmm.
for our situation, it's the exact same process as a step parent, but it'll be a second parent.
Yeah. And I'm a rare step parent who's been a part of my stepdaughter's life since she was born, which is
Oh,
kind of
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yes, it is pretty neat. It is pretty neat. I want to delve a little bit into the work that you do. You've touched on it, you've hinted at, you've alluded to it. But as we were talking before we started recording, I was saying to you that the focus of this podcast is really to provide information and guidance to people who are looking at starting and growing their families through parenthood. And so obviously one of the options available to them is adoption. You work in that capacity. Can you share some insight about what kinds of things people should be looking for, knowing, asking, that kind of thing as they're getting started?
Sure. I think there's a perspective that a lot of folks have that they need to just adopt this perfect little baby, and that baby's going to have zero attachments and zero trauma because they can raise them and everything's going to be perfect. We really need to think about the impacts that happen to infants in utero. I mean, there's lots of chemical things happening. Children have things that go on, even in a family that doesn't have adoption. Things happen and there's traumas and things like that. No person is perfect, even if you birthed them. So,
Mm-hmm.
kind of giving people the openness to look at children that are in foster care. I think that there's a lot of people who think that they need to do an international adoption. A lot of those are sketchy. There's a lot of situations where I have had kids who get returned to the foster care system in a local agency who were adopted from Russia or Korea. And under really sketchy, crazy terms, and a lot of information that's not told. I had a family who literally went to adopt one kid and then was forced to take home six, all from the same family. And you better believe that didn't go well. And those kids had a lot of trauma. So
Yeah.
there's, I would say I support domestic. I think adopting from foster care is the most beautiful thing that you can do. These are children who may not have another option. You don't have to pay for stuff to do this. This is a thing where you can work with an agency, they can complete your home study. You might have to pay for like a background check or something, but when you look at what it would cost to adopt a child from another country versus what it would cost to do something domestically, it is nickels and dimes in comparison to like insane amounts of money.
Hmm.
It's really, I think foster care in general, you have to go into it with the idea of it being foster care if you are expecting to get an extremely young child. But older kids, there's little ones as well, but usually, you have a million people interested in younger kids. Look at older children. You know what they've got going on. You know what traumas they've been through. You know kind of any things that are happening. And those kids have fewer chances. So there's a website called adoptuskids.org. That is something that I definitely recommend people look at. Those are all of the kids who are legally free for adoption in the US, and it links you directly to their social worker. You can submit your home study. I definitely recommend having a home study completed so that if you have a kid you're interested in, it just expedites the process because they might have multiple families interested and you don't want them in foster care longer. But there's a lot of options to look at domestically rather than just going, and trying to do something outside.
Fair. Here in Canada, and I can only speak from what I know about the way things are in Canada, there's well, in Ontario, everything's run by the Children's Aid Society and
Mm-hmm.
overseen. The foster care system is overseen by the Children's Aid Society. And people who are interested in becoming foster parents or adopting through the system have to go through an extensive education process. Is that the
Mm-hmm.
same where you are, that they take literally months of classes to learn?
Yeah, it's not as long here. If you work with like a private agency, they may have things that are a little bit longer, but they have the bare minimum is like a 6 week thing. And so it's like one night a week, you get homework, and then you have continuous support of your agency because your agency should be navigating all of the challenges. They're seeing that kid multiple times a month at minimum one, but interacting with you quite a bit. So you have support through the process, but there's training and things that you get obviously that are like the bare minimum, but depending on what your kiddo might have going on, there might be additional trainings and resources that are available to you. But if they don't get those resources from their agency, seek them. There are other
Mhm.
ways to get that information. If you know you've got a kid who's going to have reactive attachment disorder, look it up. I mean, at bare minimum, look it up. Like, start looking online, find community, start seeing what's around your area. Not every agency is the best in the world. I'll be honest about that.
Sure.
Uh, but there are some that are super fantastic and you might get, a great social worker, but you might not. So you are your own best advocate. So my advice would be if you're not getting the things that you need, then you be the catalyst to make it happen.
That's That's good advice also for those who are starting the journey and who are doing the investigation, because if you can't advocate for what you need for yourself to learn how to become the parent that you want to be, then how are you ever going to learn how to be the advocate for the child that your child needs them to be?
Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is wise. And I will put that website in the show notes because it's important to have people know where they can even start to look to
Yes.
find the information, right? We hear about many different things in life sort of on in the periphery. We hear about there being foster and foster to adopt programs. We hear about there being private adoption and
Mhm.
RIVF and IVF and IUI and surrogacy and all these things we hear in the periphery. And until we are actually slowing down to investigate what's going to work best for us, it all stays there, but we don't necessarily know how to take it from the periphery and find the information we need
Yeah.
to make the informed decision.
It
So,
can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of different paths. I would say if someone is curious about doing kind of the foster care route, I say start with foster. You don't have to jump into it to immediately, adopt. Like, you can just see, do you have capacity to handle this? Is this
mhm,
something that's really realistic for your life? Because not everybody's a perfect fit for it. It's not
mhm,
easy. Parenting isn't easy. So
right.
it's
Yeah.
really just trying to be realistic with yourself, and you have to have that bigger perspective of the things that you are doing is going to impact another person really significantly. So if you're not prepared, that's okay. You might not have to be a permanent solution, but you might be a good blip on their radar or a good support, even at minimum of something like that.
Yeah. Can you spend just a moment talking about, because you were discussing, or you highlighted the fact that many people want, if they're going to be adopting or they're going to be going through the foster system, that they want younger children, because we have this vision of ourselves with babies and watching our babies grow up. And you encourage people to think about older kids. My understanding of the foster system, at least here, and I believe it's the same in the US, is that the hope is always family reunification. So
Mm-hmm.
when that can happen, so much the better for the child to be back with their biological family. However, when we're looking at older children, is it more likely that being open to that consideration it will result in a greater likelihood that that child will not be reunified because they've probably been in the system longer? So that reunification would likely have already taken place if it was going to, or is that just sort of a, a missed thought on my part?
Think it's a little bit of both. You definitely have kids who have unfortunately been part of the system for quite some time, but we get kids who are literally, for us, our system kind of ends like they're legally adults at 18, but we get kids at 17 and a half who enter care. They wouldn't have time to do an adoption because you have to be in placement for a minimum of 6 months before you could even start the paperwork. But you know, you have kids who come in at 16 and maybe they're coming in because the level of abuse was so severe that they're immediately ruling out the parent, or the
Mm.
child is like, absolutely not, will I go with this person? And it isn't the best situation for them. When kids enter foster care, there's a few different goals, and we have to rule out those initial goals first. And so obviously you've highlighted the first one being reunification, and back to their caregivers, whoever those people were. But the next one, you explore relatives. And so a lot of times these little bitty ones, you'll have relatives come out the woodwork who are like, oh, I'll take them because they're young and they're little. You have a 14-year-old come into care who they may not know this child, either the little one or the 14-year-old. You get fewer people who jump in and want to do it. It's
Mhm.
just, it's crazy the difference of it. And people are more willing to take a younger child than an older child, which is just crazy. But it is unfortunately the truth of it.
Mhm. I just think that it's important to sort of highlight some of those pieces because, like I say, it's not something that we hear a lot about. Sure, everybody's seen the Mark Wahlberg movie. It was fantastic and
Mm-hmm.
and entertaining and heartwarming, but not all circumstances unfold like that. So
Yeah.
I wanted to, while I had the opportunity to sit here and pick your brain about your experience in a professional capacity, I thought I would throw that in the conversation as
Yeah.
well.
And you make a really good point. I think that people a lot of times think when a child comes into care, it's one little child or one bigger child. A
Mhm.
lot of times it's sibling sets. And a lot of times it's sibling sets that need to be together, or maybe they shouldn't be together. So you may have
Mhm.
one child that can't go with them, but there's two others that, really would do best together. You have to be creative and kind of look at what is really best for everyone overall. But you might have two little bitty ones who come in with a teenage sibling. And so does that mean that that child shouldn't get to be with the little siblings that they've been taking care of forever just because we're not open to a teenager? I just say go into anything. If you're wanting to do this, just be open minded. Don't rule yourself out. I never thought that I would say if I adopted from foster care, I would adopt an older child, but I can tell you from experience, I would adopt an older child. I just feel like I would have a better knowledge base of what I could do to help them and
Mhm.
how to really support their needs, because their needs are a lot more apparent at that age. And so you have a better idea of, are you going to have capacity to meet them where they're at?
Absolutely. When they have some abilities to talk to you and tell you
Mm-hmm.
how they're feeling or how, and you can see how they're reacting because you know they understand,
Yeah,
then that would certainly impact your ability to be able to support them the way they need to be supported.
absolutely.
Wow. You've given me and so many things to think about, and I'm just grateful that you said I could pick your brain about
Oh,
that
for sure, for
as
sure.
well. I'm going to release you back to your afternoon, but before I do that, I want to ask you, can you please tell me, and I know that parenting your children apparently is quite a busy task, but there are parts of it that I know you truly love. What are your favorite parts about parenting Remy and Van?
They are honestly the most hilarious people ever. And they are spitting images of us. They're direct clones, which you have to pay extra to make clones, but we thought it was worth it. But Remy he just is a little version of my wife physically. It's just crazy, but he is the sweetest, softest, most compassionate, empathetic, just great little kid, just a great kid. And I can just see who he's going to be. And it's just beautiful. I can just tell he's got the biggest heart. And Van is hilarious, wide open, not afraid of anything, uh, just an entertainer, crazy, crazy, crazy confident. And it's just really cool seeing them and their differences, but then them also helping each other or even teasing each other. It's just really, really neat because they bring out so much in each other. And it's the areas where they could do better. Like Van could be sweeter, Remy could be more confident. And so to see the duality of their differences come together and make each one of them a little bit more whole, it's just very beautiful to see.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Are you comfortable letting people know how they can find you on social media so that they can learn more about this wild family you've got?
Absolutely. So we have our biggest audiences on TikTok, and that's where I post videos of unscripted, us just being goofy, unfiltered. So if you don't like things that aren't super polished in life, you might not be for us. But no, our account is called Two Ladies and Two Babies. It's the number two, and there's periods in between each word. So two.ladies.and.two.babies. And it's the same handle for Instagram as well.
Excellent. I want to just thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been really insightful. I've learned a lot and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.